In this video, we're going to be reviewing the Shadow Systems DR920 Elite. If this looks like a Glock to you, well, in many ways it is. It's an evolution of the Glock that has led to this high-grade option that we're going to be discussing here today. Now, when you look back at the evolution of the Glock, so the Glock 17, which has always been my preferred go-to-battle pistol, was first released back in 1982, the smaller version, the Glock 19, in 1988, all of which we've reviewed extensively on this website. And Glock currently at the time of filming is in their 5th generation of pistols, but many people want to have something beyond a stock Glock. And over the years, through the various different generations, Glock has made minor improvements or minor changes to their pistols. So for example, this is a Gen 4, and you can see there's some differences here with the slide serrations, the slide cuts, and the flaring and a few other small things. But generally, Glocks have stayed largely the same. And the problem with that is many people that shoot Glocks, and if you shoot Glocks quite a bit, you're going to know that people make more changes to a Glock than what Glock currently provides. And as a result of that, an entire industry of aftermarket parts has been developed over the years that allows for different parts and modifications to be applied to the Glocks. And in many cases, when people make these modifications, oftentimes they've replaced almost everything on a Glock. So enter Shadow Systems. Shadow Systems was a company that was founded in 2016 in Plano, Texas. And they now provide this high-grade, out-of-the-box alternative to a Glock that uses and is in many respects a Glock. It is made in the USA. All their parts, including slides, barrels, triggers, internals, are all made in-house. And their primary focus in their builds is reliability. Now, looking at some of the features of the DR920, we're first going to start with the most obvious changes, which is the slide. The slide is machined from 17.4 or 630, type 630 stainless steel. And if you're familiar with stainless steels, you know that this is a very difficult and expensive stainless steel to work with and machine. But as a result of that, it also is very high quality. It also has rear optics cuts here so that you can put any type of a red dot type system in addition to your standard sights that are on here. It has directional side serrations on both the front and the back. And in the Elite model, they even have the serrations on the top of the slide as well. They also have things on the Elite version, such as weight-reducing options, such as not only the cuts, but these window cuts as well. And as we'll see in a moment, there's really not that big of a difference on the weight side. In fact, in many cases, it just shows off the barrel, which we'll talk about in a moment. The rear sight is a black serrated rear sight, which basically allows for minimal effects of glare. And the front sight is an Ameriglow green outline tritium dot front sight. All internal slide parts are made from stainless steel, and it also has a bit of an angular cut on the back of this slide compared to the flat cut that you're typically used to seeing on a standard Glock. Now, looking at the barrel real quick, all these guns have been safety checked prior to filming. The barrel is produced from a 416R stainless steel. It also is spiral fluted, which is pretty obvious. You can see that here. There's a couple benefits of the spiral fluting on a barrel. One is it increases the reliability because there's more room for debris and dirt and anything else that could potentially jam your gun to move around. It also reduces marginally the barrel weight, as well as provides enhanced cooling capabilities, as well as holds lubrications longer. Now, looking farther down on the trigger, you're going to notice here it is a flat-faced aluminum trigger, and the pull on the trigger is a crisp 4.3 pound trigger pull on my Lyman gauge with a very nice reset. So if you're pretty sensitive to changes to the trigger as well as upgrades you would want to do to the trigger system, this is actually a very nice step up or very nice upgrade. Looking at the frame, it also has a flared magwell with an extension option that we'll talk about in a moment. It also fits standard Glock 17 holsters, so if you have current 17 holsters, it will work on those. It has excellent stippling texture, so many times people have complained either they like or they don't like the stock texture of the stippling. The stippling here is very nice. It's aggressive, but not so much so that it would be a problem carrying. They also have an undercut trigger guard. So one of the problems with Glocks over the year that many people, including myself, had is getting under the trigger guard. It get high enough on the grip. It requires you to cut back or to shave off a little bit of the trigger guard, and they've already done that here on the Shadow Systems model. As you can see, it's very well done, and again, it's something that most people will make changes on. It also has 3 interchangeable back straps. So if you've seen my previous videos on Glocks, you'll know that I'm not a big fan of the hump, and many people aren't a big fan of the hump. Now there's ways to overcome that a little bit with like the $4 grip job to help angle it out correctly, but the reality is many people, when they buy Glocks over the years, have had issues with being able to work around the hump, whether they like it or not. And over the years, Glock has come up with an option where they have these little press-on back straps. But the reality is that really ideal? Is that what you want? So Shadow Systems actually come up with something really interesting here. So basically it comes with a kit in here, and you got 3 different backstrap options. So if you do like, for example, the standard backstrap with the hump, you can still do that here. You can do a marginalized hump, or you can literally do a flat backstrap. And changing this out is actually really easy. They even provide you with a tool where you just can simply press out the pin with this tool, and then you slide on and off this backstrap. And one of the nice things about the backstrap too is it has a enclosed base on this as well, which again many people have had to make upgrades to with plugs and things of that nature to close the back end in. So if one of the issues that you've had over the years is the angle of the Glock grip, then you're really going to like the Shadow Systems, especially if you're like me and you don't like the hump, you want more of a flat backstrap system. You're going to also notice it has an extended beaver tail. So again, this is one of the changes that people will commonly make when they have Glocks, is because they want to help prevent what's called slide bite, where when you sit too high on the slide and the slide goes back, it will actually bite into your hand. It's been a problem for a long time. Well, it comes standard in this case with the Shadow Systems with a very nice beaver tail extension to help prevent this type of slide biting. It also has an enlarged magwell as well as an extended enlarged magazine release button. The one thing you're going to notice, however, at least currently with the DR920, is if you're a left-handed shooter, which means you probably would like, for example, the Glock Gen 5s because they're ambidextrous on the slide release, that is not currently an option in the DR920. So if you're a righty, it wouldn't be an issue. And in fact, I don't prefer to have ambi controls, but in this case, it is only for right-sided controls. So if you're a left-handed shooter, this is probably going to be something you want to pass on, at least initially, in favor of the Glock Gen 5s. You're going to also notice it comes with a shorter recess spring, but this is something that you would typically see on a Glock 48, or at least we first initially saw on the Glock 48. It comes with a little bit different spring system, and we'll show that when we do the breakdown. Now, as far as the finishes, there's 2 current finishes for the gun. There's the black nitride finish, which you can see here, and you're going to also see there's a titanium carbonitride finish, which basically they use on a barrel. So in some cases, you can easily pick out a lot of these Shadow Systems because there's a bronze colored barrel that stands out that you can see on the front and the back and through the witness holes. And that is something that you're going to see on these models as an option as well. There's different variations currently out in the market today. So for those people that like a Glock 17 like I do, this is the current Elite model. There's also what's called a Combat model, which is about a little bit more than around $100 less. And the only primary differences there is the side cuts as well as the top flaring are removed, so it's a little bit more standard for a combat type model. On the Glock 19 side, if you prefer the Glock 19s, there's also a combat and elite model as well as threaded barrel options. And then the third option is what they call a long slide option, which basically means it's the Glock 17 slide on a Glock 19 frame, making it just a little bit easier for concealed carry. Now, as far as weight's concerned, we're going to weigh all these together. So in this case, the Shadow System comes in at 1 pound, 4.6 ounces. Now, if I put that up against my Glock Gen 5, it comes in at 1 pound, 6.3 ounces. So there's a small difference in weight, but it's pretty marginal. based upon these, and then the Gen 4 comes in at 1 pound, 6.5 ounces. So basically, when you're comparing these, you're basically cutting down about 2 ounces off the weight, which is not significant, but at least it's a little bit noticeable. When you buy the Shadow Systems, you're also going to notice it comes with 2 PMags, as opposed to the typical Glock magazine. There's a reason for that, at least on their website. They indicate that they like, for example, the base plate systems on the PMags as opposed to the stock Glock type magazines. Now, there might be other reasons for this as well, which are pretty obvious, but the reality is I shoot both, but I usually, for carry, I will use the stock Glock magazines, but I use the PMags quite a bit for practice. But in this case, it does come with 2 in the kit when you buy these. Now, as far as disassembly, it's pretty standard. It's a typical Glock type system. So if you're familiar with a Glock, you'll be familiar with this. What I did want to do was disassemble 2 guns here so you can kind of see the contrast between the Glock and the Shadow Systems, especially when it comes to the slide. Now, one of the first things you're going to notice beyond the fluted barrel is there's some components here that are a little bit different. The first thing is you're going to see that the spring on the stock Glock, you're going to have the dual spring type system. However, on the Shadow Systems, they're using the single spring system, similar to what you would see on the old typical Gen 3s and things of that nature on the Glock. They also use chrome silicone springs, which typically last longer as well. You're going to also notice that the lug up here in front as well on the slide, which is a little bit smaller on a Glock, for the spring is actually enhanced and is much larger here on the Shadow Systems, and the spring placement is also a little bit farther back than a typical Glock thing. So if the lightness of the front lug is something that might be a concern to you, Shadow Systems has definitely addressed that here. And then of course there's a hole here so that you can easily access the front sights and do takedowns and things of that nature. So basically those are the primary differences. There's some smaller differences, such as the safety plunger, for example, is they use the traditional Glock style safety plunger with the kind of the flat head with the edges rounded, as opposed to more of the hump now that you see on the Glocks. But generally a lot of the components are very similar, but there's some smaller differences that you can see here by comparing the two. Now, as far as performance is concerned for the Shadow Systems, it's a typical Glock. It can fire plus P-type ammunition loads. It can also shoot out cast load bullets, because unlike the traditional Gen 4s and earliers that use the polygonal rifling, this uses the lands and grooves type rifling, which allows you to shoot now hard cast and cast type bullets. So that's something you have as a benefit here. Now, I took these two out to the range just to compare, and what I did was I fired the Shadow System compared to my Glock Gen 4. Now my Glock Gen 4, I've had literally thousands of rounds through this, and I also have a sights on here that are a little bit more precision shooting sights than the quick acquisition larger front dot sight on the Shadow System, so I factored that in as well. But basically I compared two types of shots. One is from the Shadow Systems at 15 yards bench, and I was bench resting on this compared to the Glock 17. In this case at 15 yards initially, my groups with the Shadow Systems weren't quite as tight as my Glock 17, but I think this has a lot to do with my front sight. My front sights on my Glock 17 are definitely a lot smaller and easier to do precision shorter range shooting with than they are the larger front dot sight on the Shadow System. But so when I moved this out, for example, to 25 yards, the groups were very similar. So in this case, I had the Shadow Systems group at 25 yards, and then the Glock 17 Gen 4 at 25 yards. So again, comparing the two, there's almost no difference between the two. So even though they might say, well, one barrels might be more accurate than another, etc., the reality is for most people, they're not going to notice a difference in accuracy when you fire this gun. Now, I also talked about some of the options here as far as changing out the back straps. You also have the ability to extend the flare mag well, like that. Basically, this clips on there, and then you can loop it into the back strap to hold it into place. But if you're one of those people that likes to shoot competitively and likes to have larger mag wells, that is an option you also have on the Shadow Systems with the gun. Now, who is this ideally for? Well, the reality is if you're a steady Glock shooter, if you're somebody that shoots Glocks and likes to make a lot of modifications to a Glock, this might be a better option for you. This is not, however, in my opinion, something that a casual shooter, somebody who owns a Glock that maybe keeps it in the car or at home and maybe shoots it a few times a year or things of that nature, in that case, you're probably going to be better off buying a traditional Glock, because a lot of these changes, a lot of these upgrades might be things that you really won't see the value with if you're a typical Glock owner that only shoots casually. However, if you are somebody who does shoot Glocks more often, then this is something that you might really like. And in many cases, this is something that is beyond what Glock originally designed, that quite honestly, many people think this is the gun that Glock should have designed. In other words, all these years that Glock has been putting out their basic models and making very small upgrades, while the market has been making far more upgrades than usual, the reality is a lot of people don't want to make these upgrades themselves. They would rather buy this high-grade or high-end type version of a Glock as opposed to having to make all these changes themselves. And in this case with Shadow Systems, they've largely done that. All the major changes that you would want to see on a Glock are largely reflected here in the Shadow Systems pistol. And again, it's an excellent value for what it is. It's a great alternative to a stock Glock, and it allows you to buy it out of box. Something that, in my opinion, Glock should have been producing years ago, that the market is clearly demanding. But again, another company had to come along, like Shadow Systems, and actually produce something that Glock ultimately wouldn't produce with their own platform. So if you want something better than a stock Glock, Shadow Systems now has a good answer for you and a very viable option. If you like this video or like our channel, please subscribe on YouTube, and thanks for watching.